Hello students, greetings for the day. Today in this video we are discussing about the topics which we are going to cover in week 6. Okay, so let me share the PPT for you. Yeah, so in this video I'll be discussing about the module 3, sampling. So as you all know, unit 3 is all about sampling, and this is week 6 topics which we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss the meaning, steps in sampling process, types of sampling, probability and non-probability sampling techniques, and errors in sampling. Okay, so in the previous video, we have all discussed about the meaning of sampling and the concepts related to the sampling. So in this video, we'll move on to types of sampling techniques. So we have in sampling two types of techniques. One is probability sampling and the other one is non-probability sampling technique. Okay, under each techniques, we have several methods to be discussed. So this comes into picture when you actually have to draw a sample. Okay, so all these units, previous classes, as we discussed, right, you have to select a sample for your study. So once you have identified your population and you have calculated your sample size, the next thing is you should know how to draw those samples from the population. Okay, so as you all know, population is denoted as capital N and sample is denoted as small n. So sometimes while explaining, I might use capital N and small n for your reference. Okay, so when you are drawing the samples, under you have basically two sampling techniques, as I told you, probability and non-probability sampling techniques. Okay, so as we have discussed in the first unit, since from the first unit, as we have discussed, we know that research is very scientific and systematic way, right? So even in the step of sampling, it has to be very systematic and scientific. So we have to use the scientific methods to draw the sample so that your results will be accurate at the end. Okay, so let us now discuss about the difference between probability and non-probability sampling techniques. So in probability, basically what we do is we give, as we know, we have the population identified for our study. We take the, we give the opportunity for the entire units in the population to participate in the research study. Okay, so we are giving an equal chance for all the elements in the sample, in the population, to be selected as a sample. Okay, so there will be no bias in this technique since we are giving equal chance for everyone. In case of non-probability sampling, what happens? We are not giving everybody the equal chances. Based on our judgment or based on our convenience, we will be selecting the sample from the population. So this is the main difference between probability and non-probability sampling techniques. Okay. So let us move on to classification of sampling techniques. So here in this, as I told you, probability and non-probability, we have different methods under each techniques. So any one of the methods or a combination of methods can be used when you're drawing the samples. So when it comes to probability sampling techniques, you have simple random sampling, systematic random, stratified random sampling, cluster sampling, area sampling, and multi-stage sampling. And under stratified, again, you have two types, proportionate and disproportionate sampling. In case of non-probability, you have panel sampling, convenience sampling, judgmental sampling, snowball sampling, and quota sampling. So all these methods we are going to discuss, right? So moving on to the first technique, that is probability sampling technique, under which the first method is simple random sampling. So as the name itself says, simple random sampling, in the sense you are picking the sample randomly, but it is not just based on your convenience or availability you're picking the sample. You are picking using some method here. Again, under simple random sampling, you have two types. One is lottery method and the other one is random number table method. Okay, so you have to you either use lottery method or use random number table method to pick the sample from the population. Okay, so what we are doing here, you're giving all the units in the population an equal chance to be selected as their selected as the sample for the study. So in lottery method, what we do, we pick the names and names of the people or the elements who are going to participate in the research, and we as we all know how the lottery method works, we make a chit of all those things and we handpick randomly the required number of sample from the population. So this is about random sampling lottery method. When it comes to random table method, you can find this random number table in any of the textbooks at the back side. Okay, and even in the net also you can find random number table. So using this also you can select the samples. This is about simple random sampling. The next method is systematic sampling. So here, this selection of the elements from the population is very, very systematic. Okay, you should know what comes after what. So which element to pick. It is not random. Okay, you are picking randomly, but with some difference between each unit. So how we are going to do is, first you should know capital N and small n, that is the population size and the sample size. So when you divide the population size divide by the required sample size, you're going to get a value known as k. Okay, a value known as k. So this k value gives the difference between each sampling unit. So in this, I have given you an example here. If at all your population size is 1000 and you have to select 50 from that population, so divide that 1000 divided by 50, you get 20. So when you're selecting the sample, the difference between each selected item will be 20. Okay, so in this method, the first number or the first element will be picked randomly based on the preference of the researcher. For example, here you have got k as 20. So from 1 to 20, you will have an option to pick any in between 1 to 20. Okay, so in this example, the researcher has picked 17. Okay, so now the first item will be 17th number. The next item you should know whom to pick. So that is the reason add 20. Since you have got k as 20, 17 plus 20. So you will be getting 37. So 37 plus 20, 57 until you reach your sample size, like 15 numbers you want, until you get 50 units as your sample, you have to keep on adding and selecting the sample. So this is very systematic sampling, right? So for example, if your class strength is 54 and I want 10 students to be picked from the class. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll calculate the K value, that is 54 divided by 10. It comes around 5.4. I'll go decimal values, we cannot take it here. So we'll go to the previous number, that is 5. Okay, now I have got the K value as 5. So I have an option from 1 to 5. So I can pick any number between 1 to 5. So I have picked here 3. Say for example, 3 will be my the first element. So to select the second element, what I'll do is I'll add 5. Okay, so 8. 8 plus 5, 13, like this. Until I get 10 students from the class, I keep on adding. This is called systematic random sampling. So here also you can see in the picture, okay, the population is 10, but the sample size what we require is 5. So out of 10, we have to select 5. Okay, so when you calculate K, it will be 10 divided by 5, that is 2. So 1 and 2, you have an option to pick any one. So here, second one is picked as the first element. So keep on adding 2 until you get the 5 numbers. Okay, so similarly, in this next example, you have 12 as capital N. You want only 4 out of 12. So similarly, you follow the steps. Okay, next coming to stratified random sampling. So in this sampling, again, strata means groups. Okay, you are creating the groups and groups are called as strata here. So how we are creating the strata here is based on some common characteristics. Okay, you're creating the groups based on some common characteristics. So inside the group, you will have all the elements which share common characteristics. Okay, and you are creating number of strata based on some similar characteristics. So the one difference, the characteristics of this type of sampling is inside the strata, inside the group, you will have the similar characteristics sharing elements, but you will have number of strata which differ from one another. Again, under stratified random sampling, you have two types. One is proportionate and the other one is disproportionate. So in proportionate, it means depending on the size of the population, proportionate to it, you're drawing the sample. Okay, if at all you are not going with the population size, it is called disproportionate. For example, if the population size is more, then you have to draw more number of sample. If it is less, based on the population size, again you have to draw less sample. This is called proportionate. Okay, then you can see in this picture you have different groups in different colors. It means each group or each strata is different from each other, but inside the group they are similar. After making or grouping them into different strata, then you have to draw the sample from that population, from the strata, using simple random sampling technique or systematic random sampling technique. Okay. So this is one example I have taken. If you want to study the college students, for say for example SJBIT students, I can create a flowchart like this. I will create the strata based on the disciplines. I have decided on disciplines. So what I'll do, I'll classify into three categories, three strata here, MBA, MTech and BE. So based on the population size, now I'm going to draw the sample using simple random or systematic random. Okay, so this is also an example. You can say, see here different shapes here. So group them with similar, who are similar, like all the circles in one, all the triangles in one, all the squares in one. Now each group will form a strata, and from each strata you are picking the sample for your study. Okay, we have one more called as cluster sampling. So cluster again means group only. So what you are doing, the main difference between the cluster sampling and the stratified sampling is in strata, as I told you, inside the group, the elements or the units will share the common characteristics. But externally, all the groups are different from one another. But in case of cluster sampling, what happens? You have inside the group heterogeneous units. The units inside the group will be different from one another, but all the clusters will be performing the same job. Okay, right? So here you can see in this picture, you have a population with different elements, with different characteristics. When you're forming a cluster, you also include all these heterogeneous people inside your sample. You can see all colors, blue, green, yellow, orange, everything in one cluster. But in case of stratified, what happens? You include only blue in one strata, green one strata, orange one strata, like that. So that is the main difference between these two sampling. Okay. Then we'll move on to area sampling. Area sampling is also one form of cluster sampling. As I discussed, cluster sampling, you're creating the clusters based on some characteristics. Okay. But in area sampling, what you are doing, you are creating the clusters based on the geographical area. Okay. So maybe you have decided some country, maybe you have decided some towns, cities, villages, states, anything for that matter, based on the geographical area, if you are creating a cluster. Okay, say for example in Bangalore, inside the Bangalore, you want different towns or cities to be, sorry, inside Karnataka, you want different cities to be studied. Okay, so then that type of clustering is called area sampling. And if at all you stop at cities only, it becomes one stage sampling. You don't move further in creating further clusters. But if at all you create some more clusters out of these clusters, then it becomes second stage area sampling. Okay. Similarly, we have multi-stage sampling. Okay, so in multi-stage sampling, what happens? It is also one of the form of cluster sampling only. You are creating the clusters at different stages. It has one or more different stages. Okay. For example, here a club wants to go for promoting its to the customers about the membership, taking the membership in that club. Now, the second thing is what they concentrate. That will be in the first round. In the second round, what they do, they again ask the enrolled people to the other activities in the club like billiards, sports, swimming, gym, etc. Okay, so they keep on classifying the clusters based on different characteristics. This is called multi-stage sampling. Okay. One more example, if you are like a research firm in UK, it wants to conduct a survey. So now it divides the country into counties. That will be first stage, in the first stage. Next, from the county, it again divides the clusters into towns. Okay. From the towns, again, it divides into small areas or households. So again, one stage of sampling. So if you're creating the clusters at different stages, different levels, it is called multi-stage sampling. Okay, so when it comes to the advantages and disadvantages of probability, we have done with probability sampling. So one thing what we say is in probability, everybody has an equal chance to participate and it will be unbiased. So there is no bias and quantification is possible. And even if you don't have sufficient knowledge of the universe or population, that is not a problem, it is sufficient. But only disadvantages, it takes a lot of time to select the sample and sometimes the methods which used might be costly. Okay, and more resources, more knowledge is required for a researcher to understand the techniques and carefully draw the sample. This is about probability sampling. When it comes to non-probability sampling technique, we have different methods again as we discussed in the classification. The first one is convenience sampling. Okay, so convenience, as the name itself says, convenience in the sense as per the convenience of the researcher, as per the convenience of the respondents, and also based on the availability of the respondents. Okay, so when a researcher wants to draw the sample, sometimes it is very difficult to draw the samples exactly as if we go by systematic sampling or if we go by simple random sampling. At that time, what you can do is you can go for convenience sampling. Okay, here according to the respondents availability, their convenience, and your as a researcher's convenience, you can pick the elements for your survey. This is called convenience sampling. So again, a bias is involved here because you are picking the sample and it might not be the true representative of the sample. Okay, it consumes less time and it is less expensive since they are available easily. Okay, you can see in this diagram, you have a representative of purple, blue, green, all these colors in your population. But researcher represented as red in color here, he or she selects the people who are easily available for him. Okay, you can see more of green here and less of blue inside and no purple at all in the sample. So this is the reason it says it is not a true representative of the entire population. Okay, next, moving on to judgmental sampling. So the other name for judgmental sampling is for purposive sampling. Okay, purposive in the sense intentionally you are selecting based on your preference. Okay, for example, the sample are easily available and you think like they have to be picked because they know much about your domain and they can give you or provide you the data what you require. So based on your judgment, based on your preference, you feel free to select the sample. Okay. For example, inside the class, if I want to select people for to form a sports team, okay, so everybody are not good in sports in the class, inside the class. I cannot ask everybody to participate in the sports or in the culturals. Okay, so I'll pick a few people who can do better justice to the job. Okay, so I handpick the students who are good in sports, who are good in culturals. So they serve as my sample. So based on my judgment, I think they can do the, provide the data for my survey. I'll be picking the sample. So again, here bias will be involved. So you can see the judgment sampling here. Okay, so researcher picks from the pool of the population based on some judgment or some preference. Okay. Next, moving on to quota sampling. So again, go by the name quota. Quota means some category is reserved for your sample in the study. Okay. Quota, you have, for example, if you want to segregate the sample based on gender, based on age, based on race, or anything for that matter, if it is required for your study, you are grouping them. You are creating a quota or a category each inside. So I want this many percentage of male or female for my study. So this is what you are creating a quota there. For example, here you can see there is a pool of to say people with different age groups in the population, but you have reserved a quota, okay, and decided some percentage of male who are above 50 years will be selected as your sample. Okay, I want some percentage, so this is called quota sampling. Right. Another example, say for example, there are around 2 lakh people who have taken the competitive exams. Now, 1% has to be selected for based on some quota sampling. So you know when the students are being selected, you have different categories which you can create like GM, sports, NRI, ex-servicemen, SC, so many categories. Okay, now you have to match the percentage, 1%, and you can create some percentage. Usually for general merit, you will have more give more preference than other categories. Like this, you can create your own quota for your sample selection. Okay. Next is snowball sampling. Right here, what happens when it is very difficult to get the sample and you don't have any references? What you can do is you can just pick one person randomly based on your preference, whom you know that they have much contacts. Okay, from them you start collecting the data, and once you have collected the data, again take the references from those people. Okay, so one person will be giving might be giving reference of two people, so again from those two people, again you can get another 4 to 8 references. Again from them you get another 2 to 3 responses. It goes on just like a chain link. Okay, so this is called snowball sampling, and the chain goes on until you get the sufficient number for your study. Right. The last one here in this picture you can see that chain link. The last one is panel sampling. So panel sampling is again it is a non-probability sampling technique only where you're creating a group of people called as panel. Okay, maybe according to your judgment or maybe according to your convenience, anything for that matter. So those people will serve or those elements will serve as a panel. Okay, and you keep this panel constant because whenever you want to collect the data, do a survey, again you are contacting the same panel of people. Okay, so this is called panel sampling. So we are done with probability and non-probability sampling techniques. So we'll move on to the last topic in the unit 3, that is errors in sampling. So there are two types of error. Okay, usually in a research process, there is an error called as total error. Okay, so your sampling error plus non-sampling error together will make the total error. Okay, so we'll discuss what is sampling error here. So whenever there is a error occurring because of the sampling process, during the sampling process, then that kind of error is called sampling error. Okay, and if at all the error occurs other than the sampling process in any of the steps in the research process, it is called as non-sampling error. So together, put together, sampling and non-sampling error, it will become a total error. Okay, so that is what I have designed, depicted here in this, right? So sampling error is whenever you are selecting a sample, maybe during the process, sampling process. So while selecting the population, while identifying the population, while calculating the sample size, while deciding on the sampling frame, sampling unit, anywhere you would have gone wrong, or sometimes even in choosing the right method to select the sample also, that also matters. So wherever you go wrong, that type of error is called sampling error. Okay. So under sampling error, you have something called a sampling frame error. So here, as you know, sampling frame is nothing but a list of sources. Okay. So if at all you have selected a wrong list of sources, which is not updated, which is not containing the information about or the database about all the population, if at all you have chosen that kind of sampling frame, then it might not give you the exact accurate results, or you will not be able to contact those people for your survey. So that kind of error is called sampling frame error. Okay, when you have gone wrong in choosing the right sampling frame, this is called sampling frame error. And if at all your respondents are not able to respond properly, or they are not willing to give you the required information, they are refusing to answer your queries, then that kind of error is called non-response error. Okay, so might be their inability to answer you, or might be due to confidentiality of the data, they might refuse you to give the data, or sometimes even after keep on sending the reminder also, they might not look into and give you the information. This kind of error is called non-response error. Okay. So how to reduce these errors? One thing is you can take the prior appointment, you can prior inform the respondents that you need such and such information, you can contact them and you can collect the data from them. And other thing is you can motivate the respondents by telling why the study is conducted for, what is the use, what will be the benefit, okay, and we can assure them about the confidentiality of the data, and trying to motivate by requesting them, we can collect the data. Sometimes even offering incentives also, monetary benefits also might serve the purpose. And when while designing the questionnaire also, and while administering also, you should use the right way to contact those people. Take care that you have less number of questions. The questionnaire is not very lengthy. Okay, and when once you have sent the questionnaires, might be the respondents are busy, or they have ignored, or they have neglected. Continuous follow from your side as a researcher would also help you to get the data from the sample. Okay, and apart from this non-response error, there is also one more error called as data error. So this data error means during the process of data collection, okay, might be the respondents will intentionally give you the distorted answers, which will, you know, lead to the inaccurate results. So this kind of error is also called as data error. Okay, so these are the things which we are going to cover in week 6. I hope all of you have got the gist of these things. We'll have a detailed explanation with some more examples in the class. Thank you.